أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Before we start, I'd like to apologize to everyone for the inconvenience of all what's happening these days. We had to stop the live session because fear of contamination, the coronavirus and stuff like that. Inshallah, the coronavirus won't be an issue from now on, and we can have our live lectures. But please bear with us and be patient, and try out the online format if you can. So we greatly appreciate everyone who's participating's willingness to help, and appreciate the circumstances. I think we should start by doing a dua for all the people affected by the coronavirus, and to ask for the shifa, inshallah, and for the protection for our community and our loved ones. And inshallah, this pandemic can go through smoothly, inshallah, and no one else is hurt by it. So as we said, every time we do one of these lectures, we'll start with Dua Faraj. So I think we should also start this one, Dua Faraj, so we can have the blessing of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. So أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So, as we started the Pontic Soul lecture from last time, we started with the segment of the hadith about the Pontic Soul. So this time we're starting with the segment of the hadith about our topic today, which is the animalistic soul. So Imam Ali says, وَالْحِسِّيَّةِ الْحَيْوَانِيَّةِ, the animalistic soul, لَهَا خَمْسْ قِوَى, has 5 tools. سمع وبصر وشم وذوق ولمس. So sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. ولها خاصيتان, 2 characteristics. الرضا والغضب, contentment and anger. وانبعاثها من القلب, so its origin is from the heart. So if I went through that quickly, don't worry about it, because we will go through each of these in detail. But the English translation is as follows. So last time, if you remember, we started off with describing the difference between tools and characteristics, and then we went to the characteristics, then the tools, and then finally the origin. But chronologically, it makes sense if we start with the origin. So this time we'll do it chronologically. So we'll go origin, characteristics, tools. So this is just mapping out the lecture for today. As I said, we'll start with the origin. Hopefully you have enough time if you need to read the English. It was up there. So the origin of the animalistic soul is the heart. And so more about the origin of the animalistic soul. It comes around the age of 4 months for everyone. So when the child's around 4 months old, in the womb, they develop the animalistic soul. And it's the time where the baby develops spatial awareness. So this is when they hear the mother's heartbeat. They sort of start developing that relationship with the mother in the womb as its home, and like sort of has that attachment to it. So that sort of like relates to the animalistic soul, and you'll see why later. But like all these sensations, because that's what the animalistic soul is about. It's about the 5 senses and all that. So that sort of makes sense that it would originate at that time of the child's development. But when we talk about the heart, what are we actually referring to is the question. Are we, referring to the physical or biological heart? We've given you an image of the biological heart, but is that really what we're talking about? And the answer is no. We're actually talking about more like the place where we feel our emotions, that core part inside of us that does that. But, to really know which of these two it is, if we're actually using the right understanding, let's look at the Quran. It's always the best place to look. And in the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf, ayah 37, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إن في ذلك لذكرى لمن كان له قلب أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. Indeed, in that is a reminder for whoever has a heart or listens while he is present in mind. So here, although it's not directly talking about the animalistic soul, it gives us a bit of insight about what the heart actually is. Because it says, whoever has a heart or listens. What's interesting there is, if we're talking about the biological heart, don't we assume that everyone has a heart? Because, we're all born with this heart, right? So why is it that there's this or section? The or sort of indicates to us that this heart thing that people are meant to have isn't with everyone. So it's something that's not the physical heart, or else we would need this or. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, has a heart or listens. So it means that there are people that will be listening without a heart. And so that's really important to look at, because it shows us that we're not talking about this biological heart. And it might make our interpretation more sound. So this everyone having a heart is not encompassed in this ayah. And that's why we think it doesn't mean the physical heart, but more of this place where we feel emotion. So what we're taking it as is a non-literal meaning. We're taking it as the origin of love, hope, fear, and yearnings. And so have you ever heard the term, someone's heartless? A lot of the time we say, that he's such a heartless person. Well, that sort of has a bit more merit when we look at it in this context, because we're meaning that they feel they're so incompassionate, like they have no compassion towards others, that they've killed this source of this origin of love and stuff like that. And so that's what we're trying to get at here. Before we continue, we just want to give a bit of a disclaimer. When we talk about the animalistic soul in this lecture, we won't, and the heart, let's try separating these two concepts. The animalistic soul doesn't equal the heart. It's sort of only part of the heart. It originates from the heart. The heart is much more than that, and we won't be covering everything about the heart today. So a lot of the time today we're talking about how the animalistic soul may have limitations. We're not talking about the heart here. We're only talking about the animalistic soul. So can we just bear that in mind so we don't get confused later on in lectures when we refer to the heart. So the animalistic soul does originate from the heart, but isn't the heart. Alright, let's move on to the characteristics now. So now after looking at the origin, let's move on to what the hadith says about the characteristics. And Imam Ali says that the characteristics of the animalistic soul were two. Anger, or ghadab, and then rida, which he translates to contentment, So usually when we think about anger, we're like, oh, it's such a bad thing, and we have to get controlling it, and it's not necessary in our lives. But that's not necessarily the case. We'll show you how anger, theoretically, could be a good thing. Alternatively, whenever we talk about rida, we're like, oh, rida, contentment, sounds so good. And usually it is, that's true. But you'll see here that potentially sometimes it can be a bad thing, especially if we don't have anger with it. And that's when we get to this concept about a balancing act. We have these two things inside of us. It's a matter of knowing how much of each we have to show. And when I say balance, a lot of the time when we think of balance, it means they're equal. And by no means are we saying that. It's more about knowing balancing how much the levels of each. We definitely need a lot more contentment than anger. But what we're trying to say is we cannot have contentment without anger, and definitely can't have anger without contentment. So that is what we're trying to explain here. We'll explore this concept further by exploring anger separately and contentment separately. So to talk about anger. Anger is a noun, and it means strong feelings of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. And usually this is a defense mechanism. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us anger for a reason. So in animals, we can see this. When they get angry, it's when they protect their young. So it is a defense mechanism or an impulse to deal with a threat or an attack. And that's important for us, especially for our survival. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us another purpose of anger. He sort of tells us this. In Surah Al-Imran, ayah 134, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. Who spend in the cause of Allah during ease and hardship, and who restrain anger, and who pardon the people, and Allah loves the doers of good. So in this ayah, we sort of see how suppressing our anger is almost like a prerequisite to be a doer of good. So it shows us another purpose of anger. We have been given anger so we can control it. It's like a stepping stone. If we don't have anger in the first place, we can't like reach this milestone, sort of like, get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's given us anger so that we can control it and then get close to him. It's like one of the levels we have to get to. So that's another purpose of anger. So whenever we see something, a lot of time we don't look at why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to us. A lot of time we go through hardship and then we start complaining, go, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates us and stuff. And that's really not the right way of thinking. In fact, a lot of our ulama say, if you haven't gone through hardship in a while, take a look at yourself. Take a look at what you're doing. Because only through hardship can we get to a higher level. So we haven't gone through hardship. Be careful. Like, just reevaluate your life, because it means you're not ready to reach the next level. Like, it means you're doing something wrong. So that's just another point to look out for. So that's, a lot of time Allah gives us things so we overcome them, so we can improve. So that's one purpose of anger. But in the ayah, it uses the word ghayr and not ghadab. Remember, in the hadith, ghadab was used, but in the ayah, ghayr is used. Is there a difference? Well, since Arabic is a really, complex language, yeah, it is. But in English, it translates both into anger. So we have to, understand the differences quite thoroughly. So both ghayr and ghadab, as I said before, translate to anger. But the difference is, ghayr is the thinking, being angry on the inside, but then not showing that in action. So not taking it a step further. Whereas ghadab is taking it a step further, showing backlash. Would that be verbal or physical or whatever? So what's interesting here is that in the ayah it says the people that control their ghayr, not that control their anger. So we have to reach a level where to be a doer of good, to control even our thoughts, not just our actions, not just thinking we're really good. Oh, I was angry at someone, but I didn't hit them. I'm so good. No. We can't even have that thought of even trying to hit them. So that's something we'll have to work on, I guess. Especially if we show our anger, and I talk to myself before anyone else, I show my anger quite a lot, which means I have to not only work on my ghadab, but my ghayr as well. So that's just something to look out for. But the Arabic shows that we have sort of more than one type of anger, there's more than one sort of thing. And so I guess we can take this step further if we look at science. There's a lot of studies that are shown about different types of anger. I just forgot one thing, and it's that, how before we actually have ghadab, we have ghayr all the time. We obviously have the thought of being angry, then the action. And so ghayr is sort of like a prerequisite to ghadab. So now let's look at the types of anger in a scientific perspective. And they always, studies always show by psychologists that there are four. Anger directed at the self, anger directed at others, disappointment, and constructive anger. So let's explore these four types and try seeing which ones are the useful ones and which ones aren't useful. So obviously we said before that we always think anger is a bad thing and has no use, but we're trying to show you that that's not the case. And maybe some of these types are useful and others aren't. So let's look at the first one, anger directed at the self. And to explore this one a bit further, let's look at an interview, a job interview, university interview. A lot of us have gone through these. They're very difficult, especially when they ask us personal questions and they ask us to answer honestly. A lot of the time, to preserve your identity, you say some things, you leave some things out. But sometimes, under the pressure of the interview, you say a lot. And you regret what you said after. You come out angry, why did I say that? I made myself look like a fool. And we leave with regrets. Here, what happened was, you had a threat to your, identity. Or you had a threat presented against yourself. And so to avoid further damage, this anger at yourself comes across. To make sure that next time, you don't make these mistakes. That's the anger directed at the self. And so that can be harmful because it can really make you not progress forward. So that's anger directed at the self. The next one is anger directed at others, and that can come in many different forms. Physical, verbal, cyber, or even just bullying in general. And cyberbullying is, one of those categories as well. So what happens is, usually anger directed at others is a response to an external threat. So the first one was a threat to your identity, but no externally factors. That's from yourself. This one, no. It's when others around you have an impact on you, and it's the one we see commonly in the wild with animals. They usually have this anger directed at others. When other creatures or other people from their species threaten their children themselves, they have this response. So that's the second type of anger. The third one's disappointment. Well, a lot of us have gone through this one. And the really clear and most obvious example is an exam or a test. We study, we cram a lot for tests, you know? A lot of time we study and we feel really good about the content. We're so happy with it. We get to the test and all the things that are on the test we've studied for. So we're feeling quite confident with ourselves, you know, maybe expecting an A plus or an A, 90%. And then we get our test back and we're shocked. A C maybe, even worse possibly, 70%, 60%. You get that feeling of disappointment. You feel like all your effort went to waste. And so that is because you get an attack on your self-confidence, expectations, or self-worth, self-esteem, you know? And that's where this disappointment stems from. It's when you feel an attack on your efforts. And this doesn't have to come only from yourself, it can come externally. The first type of anger we said comes from yourself, the second one from others. This one can come from both, yourself and others. And by that we mean, let's say a mother, for example. She's raised her child, and when her child disobeys her, like does something wrong, she feels disappointment. Not necessarily about the child themselves, but that external factor made her disappointed at her own ability to raise her child. Maybe she did something wrong, you know? And so, like, you know, we're not going so far as you failed as a mother, but, like, you know, you have that feeling inside of you that you may have failed in some respects. So that is disappointment, the third time. But we said there was a final one, constructive anger. And this one, by the way, is the one we're saying is a good thing. Constructive anger isn't really like a separate type, but sort of like it is a on-flow from all three. It's the way, it's not like the feeling itself, but how we handle the feeling and how we use that feeling to motivate us further. So constructive anger is to use anger of any sort to motivate yourself to overcome obstacles in your life and progress. A motivator. And this is a really important concept because from the first, you know, with anger directed at yourself, what you do then is, let's say in the interview example, you realize, oh, let's say you've said that you're a weak person or that you're not confident. Through your actions, you prove otherwise. So you use that to motivate yourself to when you go to the work and if you get the job, to, you know, show that you aren't, you know, weak and stuff like that. And that and through your actions, you can change your face and improve the face that you lost in that interview. The second example is when others attack you. If you stay calm, use that anger to motivate you to prove them wrong, but not in a way that makes the situation worse, better. So be calm and then talk to them, explain to them, and through this you can show them that you aren't the bad person they thought you were, or the person they were, like, you know, talking about. The third example, disappointment, it's probably the most clear that you can see that constructive anger can be used for, because once you do bad in a test, look at what you did wrong, look at how your study habits may have been flawed. For example, if you crammed for the test, we can all learn from this one obviously, if you procrastinated, and use it as a motivator to not do it again. So constructive anger is really important because it's what keeps us going in this life. Especially when we sin, for example. When we sin, we use it as something to motivate us to go even further. The second characteristic we said was contentment, and we define it through the dictionary as a state of happiness and satisfaction. But like, this definition is quite limited, and when we talk about contentment in this lecture, it will be quite limited, because contentment comes in sort of two levels. The contentment that comes from the animalistic soul is like sort of like a taster that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. He's given us like the flavor of what real contentment is in an early stage. So when we get to it, it becomes really prevalent in the divine universal soul. We're sort of ready for it. We sort of know what it is, and we can like further progress it. So what we're trying to say here is, we may tell you that contentment is like not can be limited in these cases, some cases, which is true in this level, but in the divine universal soul, it becomes a really important aspect of our ascension towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So please be patient in that respect with us. Here we're talking about how the contentment, it's like semi-full, like, you know, not perfected form. And the question here is, how does it look like? How does contentment manifest itself? We saw anger it manifests itself in 4 different forms. But what about contentment? Well, the answer to that question is, we really can't tell you. Contentment looks different with each person. Each person shows in a different way. Sometimes we look happy when we're content, patient, satisfied. And so, we really can't give you a clear answer of how contentment looks like. All you need to know is it's like an inner peace sort of thing. Like, you know, being calm and not, it's pretty much the juxtaposition of anger. So now we return to the balancing act. So we'll show you an example of how contentment is good when and anger is not in some cases, and then we'll show you the other way around. So we'll give an example of a happy married couple. You know, a basis of a good relationship is that both partners aren't angry at each other. You know, they support each other at all costs. For example, let's say that the man goes to work, comes back home really angry, frustrated about themselves, let's say, from work. Like, they did something wrong and they were angry about that. So it's now up to the wife, for example, to be angry or content. If she's angry, all she's going to do is allow him to direct that anger directed at himself to anger directed at others, to her, and therefore escalate the situation. She'll cause a vicious cycle of anger. Or the alternative is to be content. You know, she obviously be confused about why he's angry, but she won't let that make her angry. If she becomes patient with him, lets him calm down, and then discusses it with him, you'll see a lot of the time the person comes back and they're like, I'm sorry, I didn't know what came over me. I was never angry at you. They always feel regretful. And that's important because it teaches them a lesson and allows you to not escalate the situation and help them. So that's when contentment is way more important than anger. Alternatively, the other situation would be if, let's say, you're out with your friends and you eat a burger that you may have known or did not know it was haram, for example. You consumed it, you ate it. After you find out it's haram, you can easily be content, be like, oh, that's okay, it was an accident, or like, I wasn't fully aware of what I was doing, I won't do it again. Problem with that is such a carefree attitude means that next time you're presented with it, you may again take it, and then again take it. Instead, you should be angry with yourself. Why did I do that? I should check all the time. I should never fall to the shaitan's whispers. I should always be aware of this. And using your anger to motivate yourself, go, next time I won't do it. Because we know a step of tawbah is to never do it again. So using constructive anger as a motivation, using disappointment and then constructive anger as a motivation not to do haram again is really important. And that's where anger may be more important than rila. So that's the characteristics. Now let's move on to the tools. Imam Ali says we have 5. We have then the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. And so when we talk about the 5 senses, we're not talking about like the physical organs. We're not talking about the nose, the eyes, the mouth, the hands, the ears. No. We're talking about more like the sensations or the ability to do these things. So the ability to see so not only the eyes, but all the neural pathways and all the receptors that we have. So everything. So So we need obviously these. These things are important. Why they're important is they help us navigate in the dunya. In the physical world, we need these things to navigate and survive the world. Because they act as motivations, because they stem our desires, and our desires act as motivations for us to survive. Why would we ever eat food if we never have the urge to, or never like eating food? If we hate eating food, we won't, and eventually we won't have the nutrients to survive. Having this sensation of taste, and then having things that we like, for example, helps us to continuously eat and continuously survive. Same thing happens with a lot of other stuff. Not only to survive in the plantic soul things, so growing and eating and stuff like that, but also for our human soul, which we said was thinking. Our thinking in this dunya is dependent on our senses. We see, we hear knowledge, and then we're able to process it. So to live in this material world, we need material tools that allow us to obtain this information. And that's the importance of the animalistic soul and the senses. The tools allow us to get the world around us, and then perform, and then be able to be angry at ourselves through the actions we perform, and content. So they give us that sensory awareness in the physical world, in the dunya. However, unfortunately, desire and our senses are a double-edged sword. They have positives, but they also have limitations, and these limitations can make us do wrong. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture, how I said the animalistic soul has limitations that may not be attributed to the heart, but the animalistic soul definitely does. And this is what it is. I'll give you a little exercise. I know it's online, so we don't have it live, but I'll give you time to think about this. I want to show you this picture of this apple. And I want to give you, a couple of seconds. Just think about all the words you'd use to describe this apple and how it would taste like. Does anyone have any thoughts about some words or things we use? I know I have only one person in the audience. Do you have any thoughts or words about this?
Juicy.
Juicy. Juicy was a word. What else did you see?
Roundish.
Roundish.
Red.
Red. Okay, so that's, you've used your side, you've used juicy, you've used, I assume, some sort of sensation to get that. Anything else, taste-wise?
tasty.
Tasty. Okay. All right. So that's what your sensitive told you. What if I told you that was just the appearance and that's not really what it is? What if we open it and it's infested with grubs? At the moment, from our appearance wise, we saw that it was beautiful. So through the appearance, we can be distracted. We won't see the reality of everything. So that's a concept we want to introduce. There's a difference between the appearance of something and the reality of something. Our animalistic soul can only deal with appearances. We need something else to look at the reality of things. So if we only approach the world, like a lot of people nowadays, only approach the world through the animalistic soul, through the senses, which means they cannot see the full story a lot of the time. They're only seeing the first line of everything. They can't see the reality of it. And the great example we gave last time is of cake. Like, no better example than cake. We showed you an example of the chocolate cake. This time we made it more explicit. We've shown you the reality of it behind it. But last time we introduced this concept that a lot of the time when we see something, we think it's delicious, we think it's nice, like a lot of foods, but we don't see the reality of it. This, by the way, is a bear batter brownie. Like, it's the actual recipe involves a lot of bear. So last time we talked about how alcohol, the reality of alcohol is fire in the hereafter. The appearance of the cake was very nice and beautiful, but the reality of it was quite different. And so that's a problem that we have if we only rely on our appearances. In terms of our five senses, when seeing this cake, our sight would, may say it looks rich, like we said with the apple, it looks round and red and stuff like that. Our smell would, it smells quite chocolatey. And finally, taste-wise, sorry, our mouth waters. Chocolatey is not a word, sorry. The reality of it though is it's employed by the shaitan. He gives us lollies and stuff like that, things that he knows we like, are very sweet, but they have things that are haram. And the test is, will we take them or will we reject them because we know the reality of them? So that's how the shaitan can access us, through our desires and through our animalistic soul. But why is it the animalistic soul specifically that he's able to access? And the answer to that is because of what the shaitan is. The shaitan is a jinn, and jinn are in charge of illusions. What an illusion is, it's not just like optical illusions. Illusions are illusions is a concept where by someone or something can shift the way we think or we appreciate things or understand things. So that's what the shaitan does, and we can see it in the story of Adam alayhi salam. When he ate from the tree, the shaitan found the weakness of Adam and then twisted how Adam was thinking to see that the tree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him not to eat from was actually something that will help him worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He used worship to get to Adam through an illusion. He told him that if he got everlasting life, he could continuously worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like the angels. So that's the problem with the shaitan and the limitation of of the animalistic soul. It means that we can only see the appearance, and the shaitan can twist the appearance to overshadow the reality. So that's why our animalistic soul can become a trick for us. It can mean that we don't do things that are wrong, or like sin, for example, without knowing it, or even just being driven towards sin. And we can give a really prevalent example in today's society. A lot of the time, we may think of ourselves as good Muslims. We pray, stuff like that. We see many other Muslims in the community, maybe, that are worse than us. They don't pray, for example. They don't read the Quran, and so we think it's our duty. This is all right, by the way. It's our duty to help teach them. Seeing people as worse than you is definitely not right. But thinking that you have the duty to teach everyone and help them is a good thing. However, the shaitan can come in here. He can use the same drive to twist what we do. For example, he'd be like, these people, they're being confused by today's society. Thinking that all this same-sex marriage and all that stuff is a good thing. So what you think you do is you have to understand how they think so you can approach it and tackle it. So you take a gender studies class at university. What happens then is you're exposed to all these bad ideas, these bad thoughts. Initially you thought it was a good thing, you want to use it to teach people, but then you're exposed to all these bad concepts. And when you're exposed to these concepts that aren't necessarily Islamically acceptable, you may start beginning to appreciate them and accept them because of the way that they present it. They present it all scientifically and all that stuff. And that becomes a problem. The shaitan has accessed your desire to help, a desire to learn, a desire to twist you and make you go towards haram. And that is a problem. And that's what we have to be careful of. He can use all our senses, not just, our learning through sight and hearing. Food, smell and taste. He can make us give us more drive for haram food, like all these ads, McDonald's, really nice, beautiful signs, distract us. Same thing with love in general. That's about sight and it's about feeling. He can make us go through that path. And even listening through music. Each of our senses can be used for bad, but also good. So we have to have something else, something that can help us control our desires and our soul, animalistic soul, so that it doesn't fall in the shaitan's hands. And that's what we're going to get to in later lectures. And it is the divine intellectual soul, the thinking. We have to use this divine intellectual soul to, hold the reins and not let the shaitan take away our animalistic soul. We can't give our body the control, give animalistic soul the controls to our body and our actions, because then it'll steer it off into a wrong way. We have to use our divine intellectual soul to be the pilot of our vehicle, to be the driver of our vehicle, so that we can avoid the shaitan's influence. So that's the concept we want to get here, that we need our divine intellectual soul to be able to combat our animalistic soul going astray, because it is a tool for the shaitan to get to us. But the thing is, this poses the question, is the animalistic soul intrinsically evil? Because it seems like without this awesome divine intellectual soul, it's really bad, because it just gives an opening for the shaitan. So is anyone who doesn't have a divine intellectual soul bad or intrinsically evil? Well, that would suggest that all animals are just evil creatures that should, just be the servants of shaitan. And if we believe that, we'd be saying that beautiful goat is evil. And I don't think that's right at all. This beautiful, lamb. Animals aren't evil. And remember, if we looked at last lecture, we said how there was a chain of ascension, and how even animals want to reach us and help human beings. So obviously that means they're not evil. So why is it that animals can survive, can only be good with an animalistic soul, but we can't? And it's to do with our purpose, as we said last time. The animal's purpose is to serve, get closer to humans, and to survive and have children, so that we can utilize all them throughout our generations. So we have to sort of understand how these two goals are their purpose. Our purpose is different, and that's why they can survive. So if we look at the example of the fly, what's the purpose of a fly? We always think it's the most useless creature ever, and it is really annoying. But obviously, Allah SWT has given it its animalistic soul the desire or the taste to be able to taste rubbish in a good way. So it thinks rubbish is a good thing, and so eats it. It eats rubbish, and so helps us control our waste problem. Without flies, we'd have way more rubbish, way more organic rubbish than we would ever have. And therefore flies serve us in this way. That's their purpose, to help human beings by reducing our rubbish cost. So that's how Allah SWT has given them the animalistic soul to be able to survive using rubbish, and therefore for their purpose as well, to help human beings. So that's how the animalistic soul can help them. Same thing with frogs. Frogs aren't meant to be consumed by humans, no matter what the French will tell you. But their purpose is to control fly populations. If there are too many flies, then obviously they are an annoyance to us. So that's how Allah SWT has created a beautiful system where everything's intertwined and helps us. And so therefore, what we're trying to get at, this whole concept, is that the animalistic soul, they only require an animalistic and plantic soul because that's all their purpose really entails, them to help us. But since we have a further purpose of becoming a perfect human being, we do need this extra step of a divine universe, an intellectual soul, because our animalistic soul, if uncontrolled, becomes a distraction in this life. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has a beautiful hadith that he's telling us from Ali Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So he says, Imam Ali said that Inna Allah Azza wa Jal rakkaba fil malaika aqlan bila shahwa wa rakkaba fil bahaim shahwa bila aql wa rakkaba fi bani Adam كلتيهما فمن غلب عقله شهوته فهو خير من الملائكة ومن غلب شهوته عقله فهو شر من البهائم. So Imam Sadiq says, Allah the Exalted gave angels intellect without desire, He gave the animals desire without intellect, and He gave both the sons of Adam. Whose intellect overcomes their desire, they're better than angels. Whose desire overcomes their intellect are worse than animals. Why he says this is that we've been given the tools to control our animalistic soul. And so if we do that, because we had this test of the animalistic soul, we had anger to overcome it, we're better than angels because they didn't have that test, they didn't have that challenge. We tested and we overcame it, and that's why we'd be better. Alternatively, if we had the capacity to be better than angels, and we don't use it, we just see the appearance of everything, that's why we could be worse than animals. They weren't given this opportunity of free will to be able to get past the angels. So therefore, that's how we can be worse than animals. If we had the choice to be good and only went for our desires. So I guess that's another important thing, like why we have this animalistic soul, is to overcome it and become better than angels. It's another purpose for it. The thing is, a lot of the time, we can see, like, it has its purposes, but we sometimes, like, question, is it really worth it, Like, is it worth having this risk of falling to even have the soul at all? Well, obviously, yes, it is, because we wouldn't be able to function like we do these in our lives. We wouldn't be able to navigate our lives without our senses. A question I want to pose to everyone who's listening to this is, why are you here? Why are you listening to this lecture? And a lot of you will be like, to learn, to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that initial motivation comes from the animalistic soul. One is that most of our desires come from there. Even the desire to learn stems from there as well. But also, we can't appreciate the lectures, we can't appreciate the content if we didn't have hearing and sight. And so, as I said before, our senses are super important. Our animalistic soul is super important to be able to take the tests in this material world. Because if we didn't have these senses, we couldn't appreciate the test that we've been given. We wouldn't be able to read the questions, for example, of the test that Allah has given us. So it's really important to have our senses to be able to take this test. Another thing is, a lot of the time we have underlying motives, but these motives can lead us to a right objective in the end. For example, the incentive, the prize that we gave. All of you may only be doing the competition for the prizes, which, obviously isn't the right intention, but through this intention, you are learning how to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And maybe some of this gets to you, and it makes you change your life. So there are positives to the animalistic soul. We can't see it as a negative thing. It is definitely something we require, and we need to be able to take the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and succeed in it. However, we need to control it as well. So to summarize, we have to recognize the animalistic soul and the desires aren't bad. They're more like a wild lion. They protect our master, they protect us, but they also can get distracted. They see food there, they might go away from their master. So what we do, we have to have that leash of the human soul, the divine intellectual soul, to rein the tiger in, to tame it, to tame the lion. And so that's what we need to do. We have to make sure that in our lives, we require the animalistic soul to live and survive. But we definitely have to control it. And that is the test of the animalistic soul, and also its purpose. So that's the end of the lecture, inshallah. We will have the video segment next. So sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.